Hello, everybody, and welcome to not quite another episode of the Best Games period. Instead, this week, it's going to be an honorable mention slash discussion slash kind of a more off-the-cuff style show. This week, I'm going to be talking about a game that technically isn't out yet, but you can play it, so it is out, and it does cost money, so it's technically out. It's a difficult and large game to talk about, but I'm gonna do my best to try and tackle it this week. That's right. You read the title right if you clicked on this and or tapped on it, however you interacted to get here. We're going to be talking about Star Citizen, which is controversial, to say the least. So, if you've never heard of Star Citizen before, it's basically made by a company called Cloud Imperium Games, which hasn't ever made a game before. And so you might not be very familiar with it unless you are already somewhat familiar with Star Citizen. The bigger name behind the entire project is Chris Roberts. And Roberts really cut his teeth in game development and game design, working on the Wing Commander series, which was this long-running series of PC games that it kind of came out during the heyday of PC space flight simulators. So like TIE Fighter would be a really big one that a lot of people would remember. Wing Commander was a little bit more removed from that, though I wouldn't say it wasn't mainstream. It starred Mark Hamill in a lot of like live action cutscenes, and it had its own unique set of lore, and it was actually a pretty interesting series that I would love to talk about on this show sometime. But many years passed without really anything coming out from Chris Roberts, and Star Citizen was kind of going to be his magnum opus, his grand return to video games. And so, to that end, in 2012, I believe, they launched this crowdfunding campaign. And this crowdfunding campaign has become one of, if not the most successful crowdfunding campaign of all time. The studio, again, to emphasize, this company has not made a game before, but they were able to raise about $4 million in their initial crowdfunding pitch, which was back in 2012. And one thing that made Star Citizen very unique was that after the campaign was over, they continued the campaign to an extent because they kept seeing people get interested in the game and wanting to contribute to this game being made. And I'll go more into like what the game actually is, but eventually they raised $6.2 million, and then it was $15 million, and as of 2017, they have surpassed $150 million being poured into Star Citizen's development. So that's pretty significant. And it's 2 years after that, so don't quote me on exact numbers, but like last time I checked, they were still bringing in a couple $1 million every month. So, and by a couple million, I don't mean like 2 million, I mean like somewhere in the range of like 4 to 6 million Occasionally, they would have a big announcement or a patch would roll out, and that number would spike up to maybe 15 million. So, yeah, they've raised a lot of money. And it just keeps going. It's this fundraising juggernaut that doesn't seem to be stopping. And to an extent, that's really amazing to see. And in another sense, it might possibly have been a little bit detrimental to, at the very least, the original vision of what Star Citizen was going to be, rather than what it has become. And so 2013 was the first year that there was any playable form of Star Citizen, and it released its first kind of alpha content, which wasn't a whole lot. It was pretty underwhelming at first. It consisted of, I think, first you could walk around a hangar bay and board your ship and interact with it a little bit. And that moved on to space flight. You could enter kind of like this arena mode and fly around and fight AI-controlled ships, kind of giving you a taste of what Star Citizen's combat was going to be like. And over the years, more and more has been added to this alpha, and made it into a really compelling game that isn't done yet and still needs an awful lot of work. So, that being said, what actually is Star Citizen? Because you've probably heard it talked about a lot. You've probably seen a few things here and there over the years, because again, it's been in development since 2012. So it's been bouncing around for the last 7 years, and every so often you'll see a story come up about, oh, is the studio going bankrupt? Or, oh, the game is a broken mess, it's never gonna come out. You know, it's vaporware. That's something you'll see a lot from people, and I don't think it's that. I genuinely don't think it is vaporware. I think that money is actually going to develop a game. Whether or not that game will be able to realize the full promise that the pitch is another story, but I think we will one day see a completely finished version of Star Citizen, and I think it will at the very least be very interesting. So here's basically the game. There are currently, I at least will spell out what it is currently, because initially the plan that was pitched initially is just, it's no longer even a thing. The entire project has evolved and changed so much that it's really only worthwhile to talk about what it is now and what they're kind of aiming to do with it, I think. So Star Citizen is actually two different games, or the Star Citizen project. First, there is Star Citizen, the MMO, which you can currently play an alpha version of. That is the most playable version of the game that is currently available. It's on version 3.5, and each time they go up by a point, it's a massive patch rollout. I think the patch that updated from 3.4 to 3.5 was something like, I might be remembering it wrong, it was either 30 gigs or 60 gigs, so it's a sizable game, and these patches are girthy, to say the least. But so it's an MMO, and the entire point of Star Citizen is kind of to be a citizen of the stars. So you start the game, and most people will have bought into it using like, I believe the current buy-in price is about $60 for the most basic ship they have available. But a lot of people will buy ships. And you can use real money to buy these ships, and that's where a lot of the funding for Star Citizen comes from. And so they have a lot of effort going into producing and fine-tuning and releasing these ships that are different configurations, different sizes, different roles to play in the space economy. And that's kind of what keeps money coming into the studio. And so the general plan for Star Citizen often revolves around releasing these different ships in content updates, along with fine-tuning the game and adding new sections of the universe, the galaxy, and so on. And so when you just start the game and you've bought in, you get access to a ship, and currently you start at Port Olisar, which is a giant space station. And from there, you can travel around this like small gravity well, small air quotes, the gravity well around this gas giant, which is orbiting a star called Stanton. And for now, the only playable parts of Star Citizen are entirely located within the Stanton star system, but there are plans to eventually open up other star systems and have exploration playing a large role in the game, and data, like both data retrieval and data transportation, because ships can actually travel faster than signals between different systems, and it's a really interesting concept, and you can see how very quickly this would become very, very complicated. Initially, the game was only supposed to include spaceflight, which makes sense for a spaceflight sim, but because it has raised so much money, the scope of the game has expanded to include ground segments, like both ground-based combat and on foot. Wow, I'm butchering this. Like ground vehicles and on foot combat and interactions, and all of that completely changes the games, right? It expands this base concept of space exploration and spaceflight into something that is much, much larger and much, much more ambitious. And so, currently you can land on all kinds of different surfaces, other space stations. There are multiple planets that have multiple moons, and there are multiple main ports all throughout the Stanton system. And that's really cool and interesting. So you could lose a lot of time just exploring these planets, finding cool stuff to do, finding interesting trade routes. They have mining implemented into the game right now, so if you have a mining ship, you can go and mine asteroids and get resources to sell at different trading posts. You can transport ground vehicles in these larger starships, so you can basically have these like all-in-one vehicles, I guess. Like, you can have a spaceship that transports a like moon rover / tank that has a minigun mounted on the back of it, and land on a planet and assault a pirate base or something. Like, there's a lot of possibilities here. Currently, it's all still in alpha, and so there are a lot of kinks and bugs still being worked out. And I think that's where currently it's hard to recommend the game unless you are kind of already entranced by this vision of kind of what people... I think the general vision of what people kind of think about when they get the Star Citizen pitch is something kind of akin to Firefly, having a ragtag crew of misfits, going around the galaxy, smuggling and trading and getting by, getting into fights, all of that, visiting, both the core worlds and the outlying rim, where the less savory types hang out. And that's and if you are intrigued by that, I would definitely say you should check out Star Citizen, because there's a lot of interesting things there. The major downside is that a lot of these systems don't work perfectly. And so, for example, recently I was trying out the new patch because it allowed you to customize characters for the first time. So you could customize how your character looked in the game, and you could also play as a lady for the first time. And so I wanted to give that a shot, for obvious reasons. And I got really into the trading aspect of this game, and so you can fill up your hold with different supplies. They appear in there. They take up space. The downside of that is if anything happens to your ship, obviously that happens to your cargo too. And so, because either the server hiccuped or my machine hiccuped, my main trading ship, a Constellation Andromeda, overshot a landing port and crashed into a spire of rock. Miraculously, I survived, but my ship had lost all of its engines in the crash. And so my massive, fully stocked trading vessel had crashed like a few meters away from a trading port, and I couldn't actually get it to limp into port, and so I had to log off. Well, one of the eventual goals of this game is to have a persistent universe where things that you leave behind just stay there. That's currently not fully implemented. When I logged back in, my trading ship was just gone. And when I tried to go to the ship console that you can go to like summon your vessel at a port, I went to one of those, and it said it was stored, but it didn't say where it was stored. It's just kind of stored in the universe somewhere, along with all of my money that had gone into the cargo bay. But that was okay because I had a smaller ship, a Freelancer, which is a good kind of a freighting vessel. It's probably the closest analog to a Firefly class ship in the game. And so I put whatever remaining money I had into shipping material in that slightly smaller ship, and that was going pretty great until I landed it at an outpost, and I got out of the ship and took 5 steps, and the ship disappeared, leaving me stranded in the middle of nowhere. Well, I logged out. I logged back in, and that ship was stored at that outpost that I had just been at. However, outposts can't spawn ships. So, it's also effectively just stored in the ether. But I tried to go to the outpost anyway, to maybe I can buy and sell the cargo that I had landed there with. I got out of my last remaining ship, my smallest little fighter, and I took 5 steps. That ship didn't disappear, to its credit. However, I did fall through the surface of the moon until I died. So, what I'm getting at here is that this game still has a lot of bugs. And you can play it for a couple hours and not encounter any bugs, and when that happens, you can see the potential of what's here in this game. Of how, when it all gets finished and ironed out, there is a core gameplay loop here that is really interesting, and holds a lot of potential for no matter how you want to play. Like, there are drop ships that you can buy that are specifically for military use. So you could drop onto a pirate base or a player constructed base, which is not an element that's in the game yet, but is supposedly coming. You could be a bounty hunter and have a bounty hunter specific ship and capture criminals alive or dead. There are all kinds of these possibilities that are out there that are really, really, really interesting. Especially once the game expands beyond Stanton, because then you're getting into territory where players can explore the great unknown and discover interesting and valuable secrets, discover alien life on planets. Notably, I think in 2016, they showed a gameplay trailer on a still unreleased planet. That's a kind of a Tatooine-esque planet. And the trailer ends after an assault on this pirate base with a massive sandworm coming up out of the dunes and threatening to engulf the player. And that's really cool. Like, those sorts of potentials are all over this game. And so it's easy to get wrapped up in what this game could be. But it's not there yet. However, I will say that it does look really pretty. Like, when this game is working the way it's supposed to, it looks real good. And having now kind of got the hang of the more modern systems, it also plays pretty well. When everything's working the way it's supposed to. That's kind of the caveat going through all of this. But going back to the very beginning, Star Citizen is actually two different games. And so you have this MMO, and then there is also a game called Squadron 42. And Squadron 42 takes a lot of the mechanics from Star Citizen and puts them all into a single-player campaign. And I have to say that first off, I'm a sucker for sci-fi. Like, I've talked about the Mass Effect games on this podcast so many times. Still need to talk about Mass Effect 2 one day. I would love to do that. But, that being said, Squadron 42 is probably my most anticipated sci-fi game on the horizon. And that's because it has one of the most stacked and star-studded casts that I have ever seen in a video game. There is Mark Hamill. There's I'm going to butcher a lot of names because I didn't refresh myself before I started recording this. There's Scully from the X-Files. There's Commissioner Gordon from the Dark Knight movies. Gosh, I really should re-record all of this, but this'll do. You guys know who I'm talking about. There's a ton of famous people. Go look at the cinematic trailer. And also, believe me when I say, keep in mind while you're watching that cinematic trailer, that while those camera angles might not be the ones that you're seeing when you're playing the game, those are all in-engine graphics, as far as I can tell. Like playing the actual game looks as good as the cinematic trailer, which is, it's so cool that we get to live in a time like that, right? So, A, star-studded cast. B, it looks really nice. And C, it looks like it has a really interesting and cool story, which is kind of the thing the Wing Commander games in particular always had going on. There was like these really interesting character interactions and interesting socio-political conflicts going on that were fascinating. And I think we're going to get more of that in Star Citizen, or Squadron 42, rather. It doesn't look like it's going to be shooty, mission complete, move on to next shooty mission. It looks like the narrative thread that's connecting all of this together is going to be really cool, and I'm here for it. And it also looks like it's going to incorporate a lot of the on-foot combat that they've been testing out in Star Citizen, and there's also a mode that you can just do like kind of a competitive multiplayer. Last I checked out, it was kind of dead, but it's there, and I think they're working really hard to refine it. One of the more interesting elements that I saw demoed a couple years ago, and I think is in that multiplayer FPS combat, is that in some ships there's artificial gravity, and you can actually go to the engine room and shut off the artificial gravity, so everyone has to navigate in a completely different way, which is really fascinating and interesting to me. That's a really cool way of shaking up an FPS combat situation and applying that possibly to a single player campaign. There's a lot of potential there. So I don't think that this is necessarily a best game period, and I don't even know that it's a reflection of what the game is going to be in a year or 2 years. I don't know what the final commercial version of Star Citizen looks like. I think Squadron 42 is a much closer representation of what that game is going to be like in all of the trailers that have come out of it so far. But Star Citizen is just such an interesting and fascinating phenomenon in an industry where often people who like games find themselves attached and attracted to what a game currently is. And I think one of the big comparisons that a lot of people made to Star Citizen was No Man's Sky. And No Man's Sky came out and disappointed a huge swath of people. And a lot of people felt really disillusioned and were quick to call it the worst game ever and whatnot. It performed really poorly. But over the last couple years, Hello Games has really come together and made it into something different, and not just different on the surface, but fundamentally different. And I think that same process applies to Star Citizen. But I think Star Citizen is on a different time scale. They appear to have several different internal studios working on the game now, funded with those hundreds of millions of dollars generated by crowdfunding, which is ridiculous. So I'm not entirely sure what my overarching point with this episode was. I think Star Citizen is really, really cool. And I also really understand why there's a lot of people out there who are frustrated by it, because I'm also frustrated by it. It sucks that my ship's full of cargo just disappeared on landing pads. But I guess I'm still in love with what the game could be. And it's a lot farther along than when I played. I think the first time I booted it up was in 2014. And that was before there was any MMO world. And over the years, I've logged back in, and At first, it was just Port Olisar that you could go to, and there were a couple satellite stations, and then you could go anywhere within the orbit of this gas giant. And now you can explore an entire solar system. And as that game world expands and these bugs are squashed and the basic core mechanics of the game become more reliable and less buggy, I think we're going to see a lot of really, really cool stuff happening, especially when persistence gets really nailed down and we figure out exactly how things are going to be implemented around criminals. Like, what's it going to look like to steal someone's cargo? What's it going to look like to steal someone's ship? Because right now, you can't really hold on to what you steal, quote unquote, in this game, but you will be. You will one day be able to do that. And so what are all of these things going to look like? And that's really fascinating to me. The closest analog I think Star Citizen has is Elite Dangerous, but the two games have very different feels to them, and I actually kind of prefer the feeling and vibe of Star Citizen over Elite Dangerous, which I know a lot of people will disagree with me on, and that's fine. I think that in general this is probably going to be a controversial. I don't think enough of you listen to this podcast to make it a controversial episode, but I think this is definitely one of the more out there opinions on Star Citizen, which I think a lot of people are generally just kind of meh on, or they aren't fully on board until they see it working at 100%. But I've just been really fascinated to follow this game over the years and see how it's kind of evolved and how they're tackling these massive changes, because it is one of the more transparent development processes I've ever seen. They have several weekly or monthly shows on YouTube where they talk with the different leads of the game, the different developers actually working on it in the day-to-day business, and talking about what they're working on, what challenges they've encountered, what they're doing to try and fix them. All these different discussions, and it's just a really, really neat feeling to be involved in that. And I understand people who are frustrated with it. I also get frustrated with it. So, anyway, Star Citizen. It's a game what I think is neat. W-O-T. What? I'm trying to be British. British Jack. I'm embarrassing myself. I'm gonna end this honorable mention episode. Hopefully we'll be back. Just a couple things at the end of this episode. So Naomi is, we're going to talk a little bit of shop, I guess. So Naomi recently moved to Colorado, and she is having a heck of a time between a full-time job and trying to find a house to purchase and live in. And I understand that. And so she is going to be cutting down her time on the show to one episode per month. I am also fairly busy with a lot of things, so I'll probably be cutting down my time on the show to 3 shows a month rather than roughly 4 shows that we do right now. And how I kind of see this working is we don't have a firm schedule. We still have to hash out those details, but I'll probably be doing an honorable mention solo episode about once a month, and I'll be trying to find a guest to come on the show with me to talk about games once a month. And then once a month, I'll also be doing the show you all know and love with my good friend and colleague Naomi Lugo. Our next episode that we currently have planned is a redo of the Ocarina of Time episode, because the original episode for that we did was before Naomi was a co-host on the show, and she would like to talk about it, which I totally get and understand and respect, and we are going to talk about it. And I also get to talk about it and maybe have a few additional thoughts that never came up in the first episode we did on it. So I'm super excited for that. Let's see. I might also be on another podcast sometime soon. I'll definitely give that shout out when or if I record that. And what else? So that Gap episode, I'm thinking, because, well, if we're going down to just 3 episodes a month, what's going to be in that gap? Well, I'm thinking, just knocked over a can on my desk. I'm thinking that I'm going to start being a little bit more regular with our Dragon Guard episodes. And so, that will kind of help us fill in the gap. It's content that we've already recorded, and I just have to edit it, and that should make things, it should give you a nice transition into kind of our new recording / content model. So we won't really be missing a beat, but, yeah, let us know what you think on Twitter at bestgamesperiod. And if you would like to support us on Patreon, maybe one day we can get enough patrons so that we can both do this full time, and Naomi doesn't have to worry about, working full-time hours on her job, and we can just work full-time hours on making Best Games Period content, because that would be really fun. But for now, we're just looking to make it to basic sustainability levels, which we get to at around $40 or $45 a month. And right now we're hovering at, I believe, around $35. So we're almost there. And if you'd like to support us on Patreon to hit that goal, which A, we would really appreciate, and B, if you do that, at any level, you get access to a bunch of patron-specific episodes that are just on Patreon. So head over to patreon.com/bestgamesperiod, and you can listen to those for yourself. And let's see. You can find... I already did Twitter. We're on basically any kind of podcasting app. We're on SoundCloud, Libsyn, iTunes, all kinds of big stuff. The only major streaming service that we're not on is Spotify, because Spotify is just, it's bad, and it has bad policies, and definitely not because of any other reasons. Spotify's fine. It's their weird content flagging policy leaves us kind of out and dry, because we properly cite and use music from a couple different sources, and so what you gonna do, I guess, because it often gets erroneously flagged as other people's content, even though it is not. Anyway, it's the whole YouTube thing. It's the whole YouTube copyright strike thing. That's why we're not on Spotify. Long story short. Anyway, you can also find us on community.extra-life.org. It can be kind of hard to find where the show is now on that site. If you add /articles at the end, you will find the article section. If you head kind of, if you mouse over Community Hub and click latest articles, that will also get you to where our articles appear on the community site. And with that being said, if you've never heard of Extra Life before, I would highly encourage you to check it out over at extra-life.org. And there you can find out what it's all about. It's basically, here's a hint, it's basically a charity that helps sick and injured kids. And the people who participate and raise money, you play games. So basically, if you want to participate in Extra Life, you play games and you raise money for sick and injured kids. And if you listen to this episode, chances are you probably play games. So hey, why not play games and also help kids? And also a cool thing is if you sign up, again, over at extra-life.org, you can actually choose which Children's Miracle Network hospital you want to support, and 100% of everything you raise goes directly to that hospital to help sick and injured kids. So you should definitely do that. Anyway, if my voice has sounded tired today, it's because I am completely exhausted on a profound and fundamental level, and I apologize if it wasn't nice to listen to. And with that, we will see you next week, either with a Dragon Guard episode or with a guest episode, or maybe a Naomi episode. Who knows? I almost said lepisode. That's how tired I am. Please drink plenty of water and get good sleep. And we'll see you on the flippity dippity.
Let's go to see what we can find.